This House is now in standing Finance Committee. Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Mr. Chairman, sir, I seek
Head 32.
Mr. Chairman, as Head 32 is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, I seek your permission to have my staff join me in the well of the House.
Honourable Member, be so permitted.
Mr. Chairman, Head 32, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, in the amount of $65,836,076.
Honourable Minister, you may proceed with your opening remarks for 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, please permit me to do a couple of things at the outset, because as you would recognize, there had been a slightly different batting order, if you will, and circumstances beyond our control have caused us to make an amendment to that. So I am appearing before you at a time when I did not anticipate doing that. I want to begin, therefore, by indicating publicly to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition my sense of apology that this was done with very little notice to him. In fact, it was done with very little notice to me, just about a couple of hours. And I am very grateful to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition for his willingness to cooperate with us in the absence of appropriate prior advance notice. Equally, Mr. Chairman, I want to take the opportunity to introduce the members of staff from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade who are here with me, equally at short notice, because when they woke up this morning, and indeed up to lunchtime, they had no idea that they would be here today doing this. Permanent Secretary, Ms. Joyanne Skinner, to my left, and then to my right is the Director General of the Ministry, Ms. Donna Ford. Somewhere behind me, obviously I can't see, I have the Chief of Protocol, Risa Lane, Financial Controller, Ms. Sanji Jules, and then 3 Senior Foreign Service Officers, Mr. Tyrone Brathwaite, Dr. Ricardo Kelman, and Mr. Corey Archer, respectively. Our Chief Economist, Mr. Evans Agard, Senior Chief Economist, Mr. Dwayne Innes, and Manager of Information Systems, Andre Adams, and Foreign Service Officer, Joanna Ben Griffith. Now, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to come then to the root of this matter. As was indicated at the outset, we are dealing with just approximately a $65 million budget to represent and defend Barbados's interests, and that obviously equates to a sum which is less than roughly 2.5% of the total budget of the country. And without wanting in any way to sound repetitive, because I know you heard it in the last presentation, for this ministry, it cannot be business as usual. When we went to bed last night, all of us would have believed that we lived in a world where Great Britain still remained committed to engaging in significant overseas development assistance. By midday today, Great Britain's Prime Minister has indicated that Great Britain will reduce overseas development assistance, which means funding essentially to small developing countries such as ours. In the US, aid a month ago was a thriving entity doing its best around the world to assist countries such as ours with development assistance and technical assistance of every kind imaginable. And today, 2,000 of the members of US aid have been fired and all of the rest have been sent on administrative leave until further notice. So that there has been a lightning fast change in what we understood to be our reality in terms of our relationship with the rest of the world, and there's a shift in the global political realities as a whole. Over the course of the last few months, 3 months or so, we would have seen the rise of the far right in the countries of Europe, Italy, Germany, France. And the question that reasonably can be asked is whether the traditional alliances of the North Atlantic, and that is the place that we in this region have traditionally looked to, whether those alliances are holding. And if in fact they are not holding, then the question has to be asked, what is taking their place? And as we ask that, then obviously the question must also be, what is the role of small states and what is the future of small states? And I'd be very happy to engage more deeply on that, because I believe that the issue of multilateralism is something that I feel this House must interrogate more deeply and more closely. Suffice it to say, Mr. Chairman, that we have seen the rise of what may well be called by some a Napoleonic figure in the North Atlantic. And we have seen business leaders and political leaders alike donning the image of sycophants and genuflecting almost before a leviathan. And a number of challenges really arise which we have to address as a small island developing state. The first of them, I think, is really the need for us to recognize that we must now be more strategic than we have ever been before. We have had a history of episodic responses to challenges without necessarily being strategic. The first point I would want to make to this honorable chamber is that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade has adopted a posture and intends to continue to adopt that posture for the foreseeable future of being far more strategic, as we now live in an era where it is vital for strategic thinking, and we have to come together, not only on our part, but come together with other like-minded states in this region and outside of the region in the context of alliances and partnerships that are strategically structured. I make the second point, Mr. Chairman, that in similar vein to what has happened in the United States, it is necessary to clearly define for ourselves what we understand to be the best possible trade policy that this country can have, and to use and leverage the influence that we have within CARICOM to make sure that we can have a regional trade policy which equally focuses on the strategic priorities of this region. It has to be smarter, it has to be more diversified in my judgment. And Mr. Chairman, just to give you a few examples of some of the things that we are thinking about, we have to link that trade policy to our industrial policy and therefore explore new areas of economic activity to diversify the region's economy, more importantly, to diversify Barbados's economy. I'm happy to engage more deeply with that with some of my colleagues on some areas such as pharma, life sciences, data management. These are areas where I think, Mr. Chairman, we have a wealth of opportunity. I'm mindful, sir, that you only gave me 10 minutes. I'm not sure how long I spoke thus far. If you just give me some guidance, I'm at 6. And I don't want to go beyond 10 because that means I give a gift of gab to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. And I know that he does not just want to talk. I know he wants to ask questions, and I want to engage with him. Because it is very important, sir, that this matter be one in which the two sides of the House can hopefully come to not contention, but a meeting of minds.
Yes, Honourable Member, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. More than sufficient. Strategic imperatives, sir, is the other thing that I want to engage this House on. What are the strategic imperatives of the country, Barbados? I mentioned before the issue of multilateralism, and I want to say that for me, that is a point of departure, inescapable, fundamental, about which we cannot compromise. There must be engagement with other states like ours and with other nations which may be like-minded, even if they don't have a similar economic or demographic profile. And more importantly than ever before, that is the case now. You may have seen over the weekend, sir, the news that came out that there's an entity in the United States called the Heritage Foundation, which has persuaded as many as 8 or 10 Republican congressmen and women to support a piece of legislation in the United States Congress, which is now calling for the defunding of the United Nations, which drives a stake through the heart of the multilateral process. These are things, sir, that I think it is important for small states like ours, which would otherwise be rendered voiceless if we don't have that multilateral framework to function within, to make our presence felt. There has to be an extension, therefore, of our diplomatic influence in this regard, and of course, the thought leadership and regional alliance building, which Barbados has been at the center of for all these years. And last, but by no means least, sir, I think that we have to be very focused, again, as I mentioned, thought leadership, on the issue of how we confront existential threats. And we know them because we have debated them in this House. We have debated climate financing. We have debated the question of climate justice. We have debated the future of the maritime space, the fishing industry, illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing, which is a matter near and dear to my friend, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central, public health governance, sir. We know the existential threats. And again, I am at the disposal of the House to have dialogue on these matters so that we could have a further illumination of the thoughts of the, at a policy level of the ministry. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to take the opportunity to move that head 32 stand part.
Thank you, Honourable Member, Honourable Minister, right on time. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I'm obliged to you, Your Honor. Let me begin by saying that, Lord, my heart is not haughty, nor mine eyes lofty. Neither do I exercise myself in great matters or in things too high for me. I note the mood of the Honourable Member for St. James Central, and I have seen a more articulate, I have seen a more composed gentleman. Something brings my parliamentary colleague today to a new composure in which he extends apology to me, and I can assure him that my upbringing has taught me to be gracious and to be kind and to accept the apology. If he had apologized for the conduct of his colleagues yesterday, who several of them asked for me to be put out, to be shut up. Yes, it was said in here yesterday, put him out, put him out. If the apology extends to that, I too will accept that apology. I am not here in any triumphalist spirit. As I said, I began by quoting Psalm, I believe it's 131. Now, to come to the immediate business, the Honourable Member for St. James Central did make reference to a slightly different batting order, and I'm quoting him. And he was gracious enough to apologize to me. He called and asked me if I would agree to shift from the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology, I think that's the name of it, and to deal with foreign affairs at short notice. And I wouldn't say with no preparation, because we come here with knowledge. We don't come here and learn things while we sit here. So that when the honorable member asks me to adjust my mental thoughts, or my mental preparation to this, that is not difficult to do. We come with fixed ideas as to life. Foreign affairs. It must be a concern to the people of this country that we have a de jure Minister of Foreign Affairs. And the honorable member for St. James Central is a lawyer, and he appreciates those Latin words, de jure. I accuse him today of being a de jure Minister of Foreign Affairs. And he will understand that I do that because I also give him the title of a de facto Junior Minister of Foreign Affairs. He's been taken around the globe to several capitals. In fact, the speech that usually the very articulate member made here today, he has not made a speech as lengthy as that in any of the capitals of the world to which he's been carried, like a baby in arms. Since the Prime Minister now seems to be the de facto Minister of Foreign Affairs, and we want to remind the Prime Minister of this country that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is not an office to conduct a personal political crusade across the globe. That this country is seriously entitled to representation across the globe and in the capitals of this globe, representing and defending the genuine foreign affairs interests of this country. We have seen a degeneration of foreign affairs in this country to a personal political crusade. And we have people in Barbados conjecturing as to ambitions, as to personal ambitions across the globe at the expense of the genuine interests of this country. Your Honor, I was going to make this speech whether the earlier events of today had occurred or not. This speech is not adjusted to any recent events. How much time do I have, sir? Another 7?
You have 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Good, I'm halfway. So that the events of earlier today have not influenced what I came here today to say. That this country is in a perilous state. And its foreign affairs, the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs, is doing nothing to further the domestic interests of this country. And I repeat, while a personal crusade is conducted in the name of the people of this country. Let us go to this thing called regathering, because this minister has taken responsibility for a part of that charade called regathering. And that yes, it is a charade, and that $624,000 of the taxpayers' money have been dedicated to this ministry to deal with regathering. And there was a launch of regathering in the London High Commission, and the flyer, which launched by advertisement that regathering event, carried the logo of the Barbados Labour Party, and that is evidence as to what we have said about regathering conceptually. that we gathering is a partisan event. It's a Barbados Labour Party event masquerading as a national event. And that is what is happening to foreign affairs in this country. So when it is not being used for a personal political crusade, it is being used to further the interests of the Barbados Labour Party in the name of the people of Barbados, and more importantly, in the money of the people of Barbados. This speech has nothing to do with the events of earlier today. I had this speech well in my mind. Well in my mind, sir. So that foreign affairs has now been reduced not only to personal ambitions, but to the enfranchisement of friends. We hear about a mission, a planned mission in Morocco, and I can tell you who will get the job. We hear of one along the east coast of Africa, Kenya. We hear of another one in somewhere in the Middle East. All personal friendships, enfranchised expensively in the name of the people of Barbados and with the money of the people of Barbados. Our foreign affairs has degenerated into feathering the nest of friends. And if foreign affairs is to become serious in this country, it must abandon these global escapades and come right back to CARICOM. This country is suffering a food crisis. And we bring in food from all over the globe. And apart from bringing food from all over the globe, we bring a lot of pretty talk from all over the globe. We need our food from here in the Caribbean. We need to establish alliances among CARICOM. That's the most important feature of our foreign affairs right now. I can be challenged on that. And I have proposed previously, and I'm going to say it here in this Parliament, that this CARICOM, if it is to mean anything, that the Prime Ministers of this CARICOM must convene prime ministerial cabinet meetings once every 6 weeks around the capitals of this Caribbean. Because we had a conference here over the weekend. It has not registered in the consciousness of Barbadians because Barbadians and the people of the Caribbean are not taking CARICOM as seriously as they used to. They're not taking it as seriously as they ought to because there's a personal political crusade which is being conducted at the expense of serious foreign affairs in this country. I have so much to ask this minister.
Honourable member, you will
How
get
many?
the
One more
opportunity
minute,
to ask
sir?
me. No, your time has expired.
My time is up. So
Yes.
you give me one sentence, and I will be grateful.
One sentence.
You're very gracious, sir. So that we need to redefine our foreign affairs. We need to find once again the essence of our foreign affairs. We need to understand our relationship with the rest of the world, and most importantly, we need to redefine, reestablish, and understand our relationship with this CARICOM. Your Honor, I am obliged to you.
Thank you. Let me just outline the process to the officers of the ministry, as I'm quite sure that those other honorable members of the House are quite aware of the process as this is now our third head that we are discussing. So permit me to speak to the officers of this ministry. You are given 3 minutes to respond to a question as so directed by the Honourable Minister. The Minister has 5 minutes to respond to a question asked, or he may so direct to the officer within the ministry who has 3 minutes to respond to that question. Before you begin to speak, officers, you give your name and the office which you hold within the ministry for the records of this House. Just give your name and the position for the record of this House. Honorable members, let me remind you that you have your question, and I'm deliberately reminding you because I want you to definitely follow these instructions. You have your questions to the minister must not exceed 3 minutes. You can use that 3 minutes to make a statement or comments, and then that we shift to another member of the House. Or you ask a question, and then you would have, if you believe that the question has not been answered satisfactorily, you would then have 3 supplementary questions to that question that you have asked. The supplementary must be related to the question that you have asked initially. And then we move on to the next member. So, having said that, I don't know if the minister wants to come in or say something else.
I would be very happy to, sir. I was going to invite you to explain to me whether the rules allow me to respond in any way to the outpouring that we just heard from the leader of the opposition.
During the course of your time in the well, you have ample of 5-minute opportunities to respond.
But I can't respond directly. No. Okay. Thank you, sir.
So we move to Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I might be able to assist my friend in the well in some way, because like him, I was slightly confused at the apparent disjointed ramblings of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. But I did manage to glean, if I sifted hard enough and searched hard enough for some sense to what was being said, that there was some question about the role of the new missions and about our diplomatic policy in terms of expanding our international footprint and brand recognition through missions and through new missions. So I don't know, Minister, if you would be able to explain what provisions are being made for new missions, what is the philosophy that is governing the establishment of these missions, and what do we hope to achieve by them. That might be a good starting point for you. And I think that somewhere in there, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition was trying to ask that. He didn't quite get there, but I think he was trying to get there. So if we can help him.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Honourable members, Mr. Chairman, let me say to you that the expansion of missions abroad has absolutely nothing to do with any individual in government or any ambition of any individual in government. It really is about making sure that Barbados's diplomatic footprint is now felt around the world. Why do we wish to do that? We wish to do that for the simple reason that the entire ecosystem of foreign affairs has changed. When we were children, Mr. Chairman, you and I, when the leader of the opposition was a boy, he and I would have grown up in a Barbados where we could look to the United Kingdom, and that there was a sense in the United Kingdom of a feeling of some responsibility. Perhaps it was a moral shame about the slavery and colonial experience. I do not know, but there was a willingness to partner. I began this afternoon by making the point that Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of England, today has cut overseas development assistance. What does that mean? It means that we are forced even more to paddle our own canoe. We know from the last few weeks that that is also the case with the United States of America. So let us not use this place as an opportunity to peddle what is really a form of deeply unfortunate petulance about a relationship between individuals. Barbados is bigger than that. This is now about a situation where all of the developing countries of the world, of the South in particular, and more important for me, this island, Barbados, and by extension, the Caribbean region, is under a degree of threat because those alliances that we thought we could traditionally rest on and hold dear are disappearing beneath our feet. And so therefore, we go back to the question of missions abroad. We have to find the resources and make the commitment to have Barbados's interests and Barbados's voice represented overseas and defended and promoted overseas. So that, for example, Mr. Chairman, when we go to have a mission, we already have, so I think the leader of the opposition was misunderstanding what has happened. We have a mission in Kenya. We have one in Ghana. And it is through the mission in Kenya and Ghana that we have been able to build a relationship with the African Union. And it is through the relationship with the African Union, about which I will not compromise, that we are in a position to have the Afro-Exim Bank having a headquarters here in this region. It is through that relationship with the Afro-Exim Bank that ordinary businesses in Barbados are now able to access development assistance, financing assistance, and sectors in this country, like our tourism sector, and our agriculture sector, are able to develop financing, or access financing assistance, and have a greater degree of opportunity for growth. This is what it is fundamentally about. And equally, Mr. Chairman, it is about creating more opportunities so that when, for example, we are able to have a closer knitting of our relationship with Africa, as we have through those two missions, or when, for example, we are able to have a closer knitting of our relationship with Latin America, as we have a mission that we opened in Brazil, and another one that we opened in Panama, we are able, Mr. Chairman, then, therefore, to have commercial relationships being established between ourselves and with those countries. Now, why is that important? It is important because Barbados has a one-country approach. And wherever we go, we are using our missions to promote our tourism product. We're using our missions to promote our industrial effort. We're using our missions, Mr. Chairman, to promote our culture. We're using our missions to promote Barbados as a whole. And quite frankly, sir, the fruits of that, again, can be seen in the relationship with Panama. It can be seen in the relationship with Brazil. So that we have now, when this government came to office, we were getting one flight a week from Copa out of Brazil directly, out of Panama directly. It is going around 4 days a week now, sir. That is tourism. The belly of the aircraft is being used to move products, sir. That is commerce and business. And that is what it is about. So that I thank the Honourable Member for the question, and I hope that I've been able to illuminate a little bit about why it is that we are trying to fend for ourselves and why we cannot repose ourselves in a state of complacency. I hope that forevermore hereafter, Barbados will be seen as Little England, and that some paternalistic white man overseas will look friendly, cast a friendly glance in our direction and give us a little bit of aid, because we are bigger and better than that.
Thank you, Minister. Now, one of the things, in keeping with the missions and the reach, one of the things that is deeply concerning to me, especially myself having a portfolio for immigration, is the recent policy position of the U.S. in relation to immigration, deportations, all that sort of thing. As you rightly observed, there seems to be a rise of the far-right groupings in many countries. What does this mean for us? What does this mean for our immigration and migrational policies and any issues that might arise therefrom? I can tell you, people keep asking me, what are we going to do? What is immigration going to do about any deportees that the U.S. might come back? My concern, I mean, we have to take our citizens if our citizens are returned to us. My concern is the lack of information that is coming and the inability to know ahead of time who is being returned and under what circumstances. So, I mean, it's a bit of a heavy load. It's my responsibility once they land in Barbados, but unfortunately for you, it's your responsibility up to that point. So I'm just wondering what is in place with Foreign Affairs to manage this, and what is the, I guess, the policy position of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Honourable Member, I again go back to the importance of the missions abroad. In the United States of America, we obviously have an ambassador who is located in Washington, D.C. We equally have a mission in Florida, in Miami, and we also have a mission in New York. There's another ambassador in the United States of America who would be dealing primarily with UN-related matters. And we can speak about UN at another point. I won't go there now. In New York and in Miami, we have recently augmented the staff level by putting in place deputy consuls general. And the responsibility of the deputy consul general is directly related to relationships with the diaspora. And obviously your question is speaking to the Barbadian diaspora who are living in the United States but may not be documented, because those are the ones who would be sent or be eligible to be sent back here. Now, Mr. Chairman, the reality is that as a responsible government, we had to recognize that, as the Honourable Member has quite rightly said, we cannot control what the policy, immigration policy of a third state will be. But what we can do is to make sure that certain basic human rights and certain basic standards of treatment are accorded to Barbadian people wheresoever and whensoever that need arises. And so therefore, sir, I have reached out personally to the ambassador and indeed to Consul General in both Miami and New York. We've held meetings on repeat occasions. They have, as a result of that, been able to form a relationship with the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, so that our staff up there are better equipped by way of consultation with ACLU to be able to identify and have working hands-on knowledge of what some of the regulatory and legal requirements are in any of the states which might be impacted, where we find that there are Barbadians who may be, as they so loosely use the term, taken up and deported. Now, sir, the concerns for us here at Capital in Barbados are the welfare of Barbadian citizens. I wish with all my heart that every Barbadian who decided to emigrate to the United States did so in accordance with the best practices and requirements of law. But we all know that that is not the case. And we equally know that there are some circumstances which cry out for there to be secondary and tertiary consideration in the interest of human rights. Because there are people who would be up there, not only from Barbados, but across this region, who may have gone to the United States and not, as we would say, made themselves right. They may be there for 20, 25 years and have a partner. And they and their partner are living together with children. Those little children may be 5, 7, 8 years old, still going to school. And if you take one parent away from the family, you cause the disintegration of the family. You can have a set of circumstances where there is no funding, no financing for the family because that person was the principal breadwinner. These are considerations where we feel it is a duty to speak with our colleagues in the United States so as to alert them to the circumstances which may be unintentional, which may be unwitting, but nonetheless are real. And that to say to them that there may be a better way for us to do these things. Now, if that fails, and it may, because I can give no guarantee, but if it fails, it will not be for want of effort. So the first point I want to make is that we have continuing to build out the relationship with the American Civil Liberties Union. The second point I want to make is that in protecting the interests of our diaspora, the Director General, myself, and the Permanent Secretary have had discussions with the Chargé d'Affaires of the United States of America here in Barbados. And we have made it clear that what we really would like to know is to have is advance notice. If you are going to send home 3, 4, 5, 50 Barbadians on a flight, we would want to know in advance who is coming. We would want to be able not only to receive them, but to be in a position where they can be re-assimilated into Barbadian society, which means that we need to know from whence these people have come. Are you sending home somebody who previously was a prisoner? And if so, what was the crime that that person committed? Because if it was a non-violent offender, then that's a slightly different thing to if it was a person who has committed several armed robberies or murder or something of that nature. Equally, we must have some background of that person so that we can identify if they have family in Barbados. And that enables us to think about how we can, as I said, assimilate them into this country again. Do they have family here? In which case, can they live with their family? If, as has happened, there are people who leave here at age 2, 3 years of age, go up to another country, have never had any communication with Barbados since then, and now find themselves in a set of circumstances where they're being sent back. They have no family here, they had no housing here, and therefore it is necessary for the state to find a way of accommodating them from scratch. So these are some of the issues, Mr. Chairman, which we are working through with the United States government. And you will note the marked and absolute departure in the way in which the business of that embassy is operating, as opposed to what you heard from the leader of the opposition in his very unfortunate outburst this afternoon.
Sir, further to the statement just made by the Honourable Minister, another concern that I have, and this also is in relation to the role of the missions, is the possibility for lack of grant funding and aid that we've been seeing so much of recently. I remember that when Beryl struck, actually after Elsa as well, the US had embargoed the sale of chainsaws to the Caribbean. So you could not get a chainsaw. You couldn't get one imported. You couldn't bring in one from the States. You just couldn't get it. And that was a simple thing in the middle of hurricane season. It means a lot. We are coming up to that time of the year again, based on our vulnerabilities and what we've seen happen over the hurricane seasons, where if we do happen to have a significant climatic event, then none of us internally has the resources to pull ourselves out. So I'm just wondering, how are we positioning ourselves? What is being done through your ministry to secure for us a guarantee of assistance, especially in relation to aid and the climate crisis? There's a bit of a mouthful, but I'm sure that you could wade your way through that.
I follow you, Honourable Member, and I thank you for the question. The truth is that in this world today, and this is the point of departure, and I keep on trying to underscore this, we now live in a world where there are no guarantees. I hate to have to say that, but that's the reality. And small states, as any other state now, must find a way to ensure their own survival and to paddle their own canoe. There is no doubt, and I will invite the Director General to share with you some of the areas where we have relied upon the type of assistance that you are talking about, and quite frankly, where that assistance is now at least theoretically compromised. But let me say to you that again, it comes back to the need for us to be in the capitals of other countries, and for us to broaden, as I said, Barbados's diplomatic footprint, so that Barbados's voice can be heard in other parts of the world, which I concede perhaps are not traditional for us, but are equally essential for us if it is that we want to conduct this country's business properly. So that, for example, because of some of the climate-related issues that you talk about, we have had discussions with Saudi Arabia And because we are fortunate now to have an embassy in the United Arab Emirates, it is easier for us to relate to the countries of the Middle East in particular, because that which they have had to live through as a lived experience from the very beginning of their time, the excessive heat, the dryness, the drought, etc., things which we are now having to adjust to and adjust rapidly, they have established best practices. And therefore, they're able to lend us the technical assistance and in some cases, the capacity building for us to be able to walk that journey too. I will invite the Director General to share with you some of the areas where we have are recognizing that we will be perhaps vulnerable as a result of the policies of the North Atlantic, and then how we will use our missions in order to try to replace that reliance that we traditionally had by way of building out new partnerships with other people.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, I am Donna Ford, and I am the Director General of the Ministry of Foreign, Director General for Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Minister, to help to respond to the Honourable Member, some of the areas in which we had been receiving assistance from the United States are specifically in the area of national security. The United States, through a combination of the U.S. Coast Guard maritime engineers and Army communications experts, conduct quarterly technical assistance visits to the Barbados Coast Guard team. And this has provided assistance with vessel and radio communication maintenance. And that maintenance is for equipment actually provided by the U.S. government. There has also been joint combatant command cyber assistance team support, which has been evaluating the cyber infrastructure of the Barbados Defense Force and the regional security system. The United States also conducts with the Barbados Defense Force an international military education and training program, and Barbados, the training program. And they work directly with the Barbados Defense Force to determine training requirements and program support and software. Support is also provided for the Coastal Radar Initiative and to the Caribbean Disaster and Emergency Management Agency. And presently, there's been an ongoing project to rectify the structural concerns of the SEDEMA headquarters. And this has started, and hopefully it will conclude within the 90-day period envisaged. And we are hoping that that will not be too severely affected by the U.S. withdrawal of technical assistance. There's also been foreign military financing, a recent package used by the Defense Force to purchase new intercept vessels and for spare parts. In terms of the narcotics and law enforcement, there has also been significant assistance in the area of partnering with several other CARICOM countries to modernize legislation and criminal justice procedures. The United States has also provided support for the Digital Forensics Lab. They have supported with a strategic investigative advisor, with customs enforcement, and with an asset forfeiture program. Thank you.
So you see, Minister, that gives you an insight into some of the areas where we have, for example, in security sector, and there are other sectors where we have had a traditional alliance. And you will recall that I had said before that our history has been one of having what I really think are episodic responses to challenges and not necessarily a strategic approach. And where we are now is that we recognize there is a need, and perhaps this is a good thing. What is happening in the world is a good thing for us. It is a silver lining around the cloud. It gives us a golden opportunity to build out strategic and principled, targeted methods of operation with regard to a number of different areas, whether it is security, whether it is the way in which we treat the climate impact on our agricultural sector, wherever. And to build alliances with countries with whom we have a like-mindedness, and countries which are in a similar state of affairs, quite frankly, and therefore we can have a more sure-footed partnership and a more diversified partnership, rather than simply being blinkered and focused, as we have been historically, primarily on the North Atlantic. But we can't do that if we don't have the missions abroad. And we can't do that if the leader of the country does not engage with other leaders of other countries, which is the critical point. It is gone are the days, we're no longer arguing at a standpipe in the 1960s, and that politics needs to be left behind. We need to understand that the leader of a country must be able to engage with colleagues and to share concerns at that table, at that level, and together then articulate a way forward in the common interests. And we are building alliances with people with whom we have common interests, but for years we had no relationship. It begins with relationships and discussion.
Minister, thank you very much for your lucid and enlightening elaborations. I am definitely enlightened, and I hope others in the chambers are so enlightened as well. Mr. Chairman, I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you so much, Chair. I'm glad to have the opportunity to ask some questions, because I've recognized that across the country there is a general absence of understanding of what our foreign affairs is about and how foreign affairs helps us to fulfill the mandates in our various ministries. And therefore the work of the foreign affairs and foreign trade divisions are not well known and understood, but they are felt when you succeed in what ministries are able to do as a result of building the relationships first and building the collaboration and initiatives that come out of those relationships. I think one of the things that is not well understood by the general public is that during the Cold War, the big developed countries of the North had good reason to support us with grants and loans and equipment and technical assistance because of the fear of our becoming communists. But with the retreat of communism off the stage as a threat to capitalism, a lot of the relationships then changed, and we saw it in the way in which they conducted foreign policy towards us, where they no longer support us with grants and loans and technical assistance in the same way. As a matter of fact, it has deteriorated to the point that if you need table and chairs for your children to sit at to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they will tell you that they can't provide the table and chairs, but they'll give you a tablecloth if you get the table. And this has been a problem for us. And henceforth, Barbados had to change, and then we now have to look for money and loans to be able to provide these things in a sensible way. So I'm going to ask my questions on the various platforms in which we operate in order to secure resources and secure joint initiatives to help us achieve the things that we need for our Barbadian citizens. In the multilateral arena, we are members of the WTO, we are members of the OACP, and we have been connected, we are part of the grouping with UNCTAD. There are a number of agreements that come from out of these platforms that your team has been working assiduously on. And we are varying stages of completing those agreements, and benefits have started to flow from some of them. I would like to ask if you could share, for the benefit of the chamber, the honorable member, of the opposition leader, and for the country, share what are some of those agreements and the benefits to us.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, the multilateral, first of all, let me say the multilateral system, in the event that I didn't say it before, I want to take the opportunity to say now, is really an opportunity for small states like ours to have a voice where otherwise we would have none. It is, for me, voice for the voiceless. It is an empowering opportunity. At the WTO, you raised that specifically. We just were the leaders among the, when I say leaders, we are among the first countries to be able to sign on to an agreement on illegal and unreported fishing. Why is it significant to us? It is significant to us because, again, we're not just voiceless because we're small. Very often we're economically powerless as well. And we don't have large fleets in terms of navies and Coast Guard vessels and that type of thing. So the bare minimum is what we have, and that's what we have to contend with. But we have more maritime space. We have 425 times the terrestrial or land space as our maritime space. And it's virtually impossible for us alone to police it. But what we have to do, therefore, is to build alliances with countries who will be in a better capacity to assist in the policing, and equally to help put in place regulatory frameworks so that when vessels from Asia, as we know happens, and I'm not going to identify any particular country here, but when vessels from Asia come into our waters with 5-mile-long drift nets, and they scrape up everything that the 5-mile net can catch, and therefore young fish, baby fish, alongside the adults are harvested together. All of the biodiversity along the ocean floor is scraped up and carried along. These are some of the things that essentially rape and rob. It is essential, therefore, for our mission, and I go back to the role of missions. The mission in Geneva plays a major role in the engagements in this matter, and it is through the work of that mission that we were able to be among the very first to be signatories to the WTO agreement on illegal, unreported, and unregulated fisheries. The question of ensuring that subsidies are not indiscriminately used in a manner then that makes competition unfair, and that would render our products, as we try to get into other markets, uncompetitive. That is also an agreement which has come out of that WTO framework that enables our business people and their products to be able to access markets in a fairer and more competitive way. Again, I feel that one of the things that is not an agreement, one of the things where our voice has been heard and where we have been fortunate that people take note of the moral, and this is the strength of a small state sometimes, if you can speak with moral integrity. And this is where Barbados is recognized. I sense that this is a source of angst for some in the opposition who see it as embellishment of one individual. But if you are an intellectual thought leader globally, it is a good thing for the country from which you come. And let us face facts. The Prime Minister of Barbados is an intellectual thought leader globally, and globally respected for that. Now you take a position at the WTO where we say to them, frankly, how is it that you can expect to have an entity, which is a global entity, resolving disputes, but there is no dispute resolution body? So that the work that we are doing in order to frame agreements and get people to the table to work, large countries working with small, quite frankly, can be cast aside, as we have seen done in the North Atlantic, by one individual acting almost like a Leviathan and saying, I am not interested in that. I am going to arbitrarily apply tariffs in the way that I feel and for the purpose that I feel. And what the WTO was established to achieve was the exact opposite, to regulate that and to wrestle that tendency, which is really the law of the jungle, that the strongest among us will survive and the weakest and the poorest among us will die. And that is not a world that we as Barbadians can afford to want to live in. And that is the reason why we do the things that we do, Minister, in so many different capitals with so many different missions, because that is the only way to make Barbados' presence felt and Barbados' values shared. And it is those values are really the principles now that become some of the guardrails that cause countries with a conscience to be able to say, hold on, maybe this is going the wrong way, and maybe too many people, and we have become the voice of those people. Too many millions of people, quite frankly, can be compromised if we don't try to do this business in a better way. And that's what it is about. I don't know that time will allow me to go through them in one by one, but the European Union Partnership Agreement, that is another one that you've raised, Minister. And if the chair will allow me, let me say quickly that the European Union Partnership Agreement has a tremendous benefit in terms of business opportunity for us. There's a Global Gateway Initiative, which is really about allowing businesses such as those that we have to have access to the European market in a more seamless and a more improved way. I want to say, though, Mr. Chairman, if you would be so good as just to give me a couple seconds on this point.
30 seconds.
We have to be very responsible as a country and as a region. It is about trade, and the Europeans are opening doors to trade. And part of what we must do is to position ourselves to be able to capitalize on this opportunity. Now, it is a sad thing to report that this region, for example, has not worked out a system of mutual accreditation either among ourselves or with the European Union. So that, what do we sell most of? We sell services. But we can't sell the services into the European Union if the service provider is trained at Cave Hill, Barbados, and it is not accredited in Brussels, or the university is not accredited somewhere in France. And so therefore, we have to make sure that the service providers who we have invested in with free education, and we beat our chest, we've done this for the young people, free secondary and free tertiary education. What does that mean if we have not taken the next step to open the doors? And that is where we are now as a government, trying to bring this about after what really has been, how long was the Democratic Labour Party in government? The Democratic Labour Party came into government after the Economic Partnership Agreement was signed in 2007. So they came in 2008, and between 2008 and 2018, absolutely nothing happened in terms of accreditation. And therefore, we come in, we are struck with COVID, we're struck with a volcano, we're struck with a whole heap of other things, and still have to wrestle this matter through in the interest of making sure that markets are accessible by the people who we invested in to give free university education to. Of course, it may be the reason why they did not do that, because they were also the ones who closed the doors of the university, or access to the university to some of these same young people.
Thank you very much. The second area of our multilateral engagement comes through our relationship with CARICOM and the Latin American space, the LAC that we are part of, the ACS, and they themselves have had relationships with the European Union through CELAC. And these have provided opportunities for us to engage Latin American countries that we would not normally have engagements with. And we have found it to be extremely useful, because out of it has come our relationship with CAF and other activities that we have been able to pursue as a country, and these have been beneficial to us. So if you could share on our dynamics there and what has come out of those that benefit us and benefit the ordinary citizen in an everyday way.
Well, Again, Minister, let me say to you that you are talking about agreements, and I want to take the question a little bit broader, if you would permit me, and talk about functional cooperation. Yeah? Because when we get to Latin America, you'll realize that there's an entity that we have talked about very little in Barbados, and that is it is called CELAC, which is the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States. Effectively, it captures all of Latin America and all of of CARICOM, except for North America is on its own out there. But the reality is that this organization has been for a long time, and I go back to the point that I make about us being very sporadic in terms of the way in which we do things. This organization has been almost an appendage to the region's business, and quite frankly, an appendage to Barbados's business. And we are now saying, look, enough is enough with that. Because the signals that are being sent to us from the North Atlantic, and United States and Great Britain and so on, is that perhaps we do not matter as much as we used to. And if you listen to Sir Keir Starmer's speech today, you will realize that as apologetic as he sounded, effectively he's saying that home drums have to beat first, I have to raise my defense budget, and therefore I am going to compromise the assistance to overseas development, which is, as I said, assistance to countries like ours. So what is it that we have control over? We have control over partnerships with places like Brazil. We have control over partnerships with places like Mexico. We have control over partnerships with many of the Latin American countries who, quite frankly, have, for a variety of reasons, expressed an interest in doing business with us. Now, let me say to you that the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, in his outburst this afternoon, lambasted the government for all of the missions we're opening. But what are the ones we are receiving? I believe it is correct to say that Panama has opened one within the course of the last 6 months or so in Barbados, in Bridgetown, Barbados. So Colombia is equally opening one, or has opened already. Mexico has expressed an interest in opening one as well. And why do they do this? They do this because this country, this little rock, is being seen as a place from which you're getting thought leadership, a place from which you're getting principled policy direction globally, and they want to associate themselves with that. And equally, colleagues, there is an opportunity that presents itself for us, because as we build those relationships, so too we also can discuss what matters to us. Market penetration for some of the people who do a tremendous amount of business, or who are trying to do a tremendous amount of business outside of the 166 square miles of Barbados. And again, I go back to the question of our service providers. But I also want to look at the people who trade in commodities. The rum that we produce can be and should be on Mexican shelves. The biscuits that we produce can be and should be on Colombian shelves. We have recently done a trade agreement, and you, Minister, would have been part of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs at that time, with Colombia, where CARICOM and Colombia have come to a meeting of minds on the way in which we can create a new stream of products coming into Barbados. And quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, at a price which is cheaper than that which is coming off the shelves of the United States of America. So what does that do? That means that we have a trade agreement with Colombia that is opening the doors of opportunity for there to be a reduction in the cost of living for the things that Colombia is selling, in terms of the people of Barbados being able to buy those products at a cheaper price. So perhaps it may be coffee. Perhaps it may be, I don't know, furniture, you name it. But the point is that we now have an opportunity which didn't exist before because of the nature of the trade agreement that we have been able to establish with Colombia, which, again, could not have been effected in the way that it was without the partnership that we got from our mission in Panama. And again, I want this chamber to recognize the specious nature of the argument, because it is clear that in every case, the missions abroad are working with a view to ensuring that Barbadians get opportunities either economically or opportunities commercially to do the things that we want to do and to extend Barbados' interests and influence in other countries as we go forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing what are some of the key things that we need to get from out of these broader relationships. I find that it's not perfectly understood. I myself recognize, for example, that we had wanted to expand our black belly sheep, which comes out of Ministry of Agriculture, but you had to negotiate the Brazilian link by having the ambassador there. And as a matter of fact, for the benefit of the chamber and the country, some of our black belly sheep leather was sent to Land, which is a Brazilian brand. And they made an excellent pair of shoes and a handbag that really is at a designer quality level, really a beautiful pair. And these are some of the things that we can do. I also know when we had our crisis with animal feed and the rising costs, that immediately we were able to go to a number of the CARICOM countries and other countries, and they started to grow the ingredients that we need. But that could only happen because you would have built that relationship. Now, CARICOM has been a linchpin and is part of our arsenal to be able to build relationships and improve the trade relationships. I am mindful of the fact that we talk about the slow pace at which CARICOM is moving, but we are failing to look back to see that we have been putting things in place little by little, and that a lot of these things have become extremely helpful, whether facilitating trade, facilitating movement of people, or cooperating on joint initiatives that help us to serve the needs of our people better. If you could share with the Chamber and with the country, coming out of CARICOM, what are some of the things that have been put in place, and what are some of the benefits that we have derived as a result of it? And we would also appreciate hearing a little of the things coming out of the last heads of government. I know those were some exciting results.
Thank you very much, Minister. And Minister, let me say to you that your reference to the Southern Caribbean, the Latin American continent, and by extension, CARICOM, is very relevant. And it is relevant because increasingly what we have to do, and we've talked for a long time again about this, we've talked about diversification of the Barbados economy, but we've done very little about it. And you're not going to diversify the Barbados economy just simply by within the 166 square miles of Barbados, but equally you're going to have to look at the relationships and the trading relationships which we're able to build out with countries who are in our neighborhood. Now, frankly, and again, apparently it is a bad thing, but I don't see the mischief in it, but the Prime Minister of Barbados has been able to build a relationship with the President of Guyana. I do not know what is bad about that, especially when the relationship has come to a point where the two of them are then able to build a relationship with the President of Suriname. And so that you have now a triangle within which Barbados can see agricultural produce coming from Suriname or Guyana, coming into Barbados, and we do the things that we have traditionally done well, but quite frankly could not do at scale because of the small land size that Barbados has. So you get agricultural produce from a vast acreage or hectareage, whatever, in Guyana and in Suriname. It comes into Barbados and it is passed through a food terminal where value added is done by us. When we do the value added, we can market it, we package it, all the blast freezing and so on that might be necessary. And we use the infrastructure that we have at Grantley Adams International Airport and the hard-fought, hard-won capacity that we have up there, where we have on any given day of the week at least one flight going directly from here to Canada, but there are none going from Guyana to Canada. We have, on any given day of the week, perhaps more than 12 flights going directly from Barbados to London. We have, on any given day of the week, flights going to the United States at multiple ports. And so therefore, we're able to use the belly of the aircraft to carry to Barbadians living in the diaspora, whether they be in Canada, England, or the United States, produce which is from this region, which they know, which they can relate to. The yams, the cassava, the edders, the plantain, etc., etc. No, Honourable Member, I do not see the mischief in that. But it begins, once again, with heads of government not staying in capital, but being willing to move and meet together and discuss how you can forge these new economic partnerships and alliances that help us to diversify away from the traditional and historically structured reliance on the North Atlantic. But what is the other advantage, you might ask? The other advantage is that it reduces our food import bill. And that is where CARICOM has come into play, because CARICOM had as an ambition to reduce the food import bill by 25% by the year 2025. And in large measure, we have made great strides. It has now been extended to the year 2030 in order to incorporate a number of other ambitions. But the fact of the matter is that we can, for the first time, see a meaningful agricultural and industrial policy coming out of CARICOM. Equally, Honourable Member, you asked about one of the other successes. I would have to tell you that I think the happiest one for me is the free movement. And now we know that by the 31st of March this year, countries will be in a position where they all will facilitate any individual member state that wants to go forward on free movement with the liberty to do so. And again, we know our situation. We know our shortage of skills. Right now, as I speak to you, the embassy, the much maligned embassy in Kenya, is working on our behalf, or on the behalf of the people of Barbados, with the Ethiopian government to assist us in identifying, in obtaining certain skill sets which we are short of here. People who have specialties in engineering, people who have specialties in some of the other professions where we are short of here. Similarly, in Ghana, we have seen already that we've obtained nurses from Ghana as a result of that. And there's a cohort here now, I believe, of over 200 working in Barbados. Through the embassy in Ghana, much maligned in this chamber, and the ingratitude is such that it would burst your breast, because I do not understand how these things can be happening, and the embassies are maligned for it. Equally, I would want to say to you, Honourable Member, that look, even as we try to build those relationships that enable us to get to the skill sets, that bring in the skill sets that we need, and we understand that the country is short on some of the required skills, growth is not going to be possible if we don't have that type of collaboration. Interestingly, there are those who seem to think that we should continue to be looking to the North Atlantic. In the North Atlantic, it is now impossible for Africans to get a transit visa to get to Barbados. But if there's a country that is willing to assist us in Africa, then it is necessary for us to go to Africa, build that relationship, and be able to bring people here directly, which is what we did. The last cohort of nurses flew directly from Ghana to Barbados. Let me say, Mr. Chairman, in closing, that today, the Secretary of State of the United States of America served notice on all of us, that those of us who have relationships with the medical practitioners, whether it be nurses or doctors, whoever in Cuba, and are going to have them working in your country, will no longer be able to have access to US visas. That is the climate within which we now function. And so therefore it is vitally important that as strangleholds are applied on areas and to countries with whom we have been able to build partnerships, that we ensure we have a menu of options at our disposal. Because it is only through that menu of options in this increasingly hostile global environment that we as a government are able to keep the heads of the people of Barbados above water, Honourable Member. And that is why I will not resile from the position that I have taken. It is a certain amount of sorrow I feel that the Honourable Member, who is the Leader of the Opposition, does not share the progressive views of this government on these matters.
I want to sincerely thank you, Honourable Member. I know that the travel has been extremely demanding on you and the team and on the Prime Minister, but I've always understood that in foreign affairs and foreign trade, if you are not sitting at the table, then you will be put on the menu and people will eat you for lunch. You have to be there to dialogue, to discuss, to advocate, to defend yourself. And that because of our increased presence internationally, we have seen with Morocco assistance with fertilizer that we did not have before. India has been helping us with and donating $1 million annually to help us with certain things here in Barbados. Right now we're discussing with Germany the issue of helping us with TechVoc education. But why did these things happen? Because of the travel of you and the Prime Minister to these capitals, building the relationships, and then being able to say, can we collaborate on X or Y? And the country is now the beneficiary of it. I want to thank you for the time that I was in Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. I saw the benefit, the change in how people regarded Barbados and listened to us as a result of the tremendous work that you all have done in building those relationships by going out and seeking personal relationships with people so that you have a pathway to advance the needs of Barbadians. So let me thank all of you. I know you work very hard and we appreciate the results that you have been able to create for us.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South.
Thank you, Chair. I want to begin by commending the Minister on his presentation and thus far and for the work that he has done on behalf of the country. Mr. Chair, I had the opportunity to serve at Global Affairs Canada for a few years. And to me, the work at Global Affairs Canada exposed me to the importance of this ministry and this kind of work. It is regrettable that other people don't necessarily see the relation between this most important ministry and the international undertakings that the minister and his team must pursue. But in fact, I see this ministry almost as equal in terms of bread and butter affairs for the country, in as much as I see my own ministry. And I say so conscious of the fact that the world is changing, and we now find ourselves with changes in the great United States of America, and positions being taken on matters that perhaps may have consequences for us in the region. And I speak specifically of what some have labeled as a tariff war, but certainly the US imposing tariffs on imports on some countries, including China, including Mexico, including Canada, and the retaliation by those countries as well in some cases. And I'm just wondering, Minister, what do you think are the implications of the imposition of these tariffs and the consequential responses by the other countries? What does that, or what could Barbadians expect to have to experience as a consequence of this tariff war, so labeled by the international news media?
Thank you very much, Minister. Minister, I'm going to begin to answer your question by reference to the point made by the honourable member who preceded you. You referenced the bread and butter affairs, and frankly, Minister, again, it is about being able to attract to this country people who are of like mind. We at CARICOM heads just now, for example, were able to sign a $75 million financing agreement between CARICOM and CAF, and that was for cultural and heritage tourism development. And I begin there by saying that we can't do that type of thing unless we are building partnerships outside of the ordinary space that we are in. More specifically to the question you asked about the tariff war, again, I see it in the context of opportunity. What we are seeing in the United States is a product of a thing called Project 2025. Project 2025 was not necessarily written for this president. It was written for whosoever was the Republican to emerge as the presidential candidate and ultimately the president of the United States. But it is a clearly defined strategy. What we need is equally a clearly defined strategy. With respect to trade with the North Atlantic, I said here, I believe it may have been last year or year before, that there's a certain lethargy, and perhaps I shouldn't use that word, maybe I should say a complacency, that had crept into the way in which administration of these matters took place over the last, let us say, 15 years or so. And it is something that must, in my judgment, be wrestled to the ground. You are very familiar with Canada, Minister. The Canadian government gifted to CARICOM a thing called CaribCan. It is an arrangement which is preferential so that we are treated better than anybody else. It is not consistent with the World Trade Organization rules, so that it is entirely at the whim, fancy, and discretion of a Canadian Prime Minister, whosoever he or she may be, to say, I am going to go to the WTO and I'm going to seek a waiver to roll over market access for you good people in the Caribbean so that you can access our market on preferential terms. And while that may have worked in the 1970s and 80s, I want to suggest that it is most imperfect for us if we are looking at life beyond 2025. And that is an example of where we need to try to flesh out a substantive trade agreement with Canada. In my judgment, that could be partial scope in nature so that we focus primarily on the strengths that we have as a country, and that is the sale of our services. I believe you've heard me on this point before, Minister. I feel strongly that we have sold services across the Caribbean. Construction businesses in Barbados, there are some that have functioned in almost every country of the Caribbean. There are insurance companies in Barbados that replicate their business entirely across the Caribbean. There are, even in the food and beverage sector, there are restaurants that are to be found in other parts of the Caribbean. And so therefore, I think it is important for us to recognize that we do have a competitive advantage in services and that we should try to get into larger markets and facilitate the growth of our service providers by getting them into those markets. Is it an easy task? It certainly is not. But are others in this region doing it? Yes, they are. The Trinidadians are doing a partial scope agreement as we speak. I believe it is with oh gosh, who is it? No, it's not. Oh, the country is beating me. But Trinidad is working on one as we speak, and Belize is working on one as well. And they're doing it with Latin American countries. And I believe that the thinking behind these agreements, as far as those countries are concerned, is identical to what we have. What are our strengths? Let us identify them. And if we can work out those strengths, then without prejudice to any other CARICOM country's interests, first of all, can we access this market on terms that allow for our people to get an advantage? And I think that that is where our thinking should be. Now, had we done that with the United States of America, quite frankly, because we were gifted a relationship by Ronald Reagan, just around the same time as CaribCan. And the relationship by Ronald Reagan that we were given is almost identical to the one in CaribCan, where you are going to have a few items that are allowed to get preferential access into the US market at the discretion of the United States Senate and Congress. And they will determine in their own decision whether they are going to go to the WTO and roll over a waiver. And the truth is that the taste of the pudding now is going to be in the eating, because in September of this year, the United States of America will have to make a decision as to whether or not market access for Barbadian goods is going to be continued. Now, where did we fail? We failed by not going to them and saying, look, it's time for us to put on our big boy pants. And we want to have a market access agreement with you that goes beyond just your discretion. We believe that we can supply to the United States services. We believe that we have successfully sold services into this region in CARICOM, and that our service providers, whosoever they may be, are competitive. Sagicor functions in the United States of America. Sagicor is Barbadian born and bred. Don't ask me to accept that Sagicor is a failure, because it is doing more business up there than it has ever done before in the world. So therefore, if we have but one example, can there not be more? And that is the conversation that I think we failed to have, and that we should have had, and we must now have. And honorable member, if I could be even more pointed in answering this question on tariffs, I see it also as an opportunity in the sense that if we are nimble, we benefit. When the Canadian Prime Minister, perhaps in a fit of angst, I don't know, indicated to his citizens that the way in which he was being treated by the President of the United States was offensive, and that he felt that Canadians should rally behind him and not import alcohol from the United States of America, it created an opportunity for Barbados rum in Canada. When he said, don't take your vacation in the United States of America, it in effect creates an opportunity for Barbados tourism with Canada. And we have to see these things, read the headline, and be nimble enough by the morning after you read the headline to be able to have a plan put together that you can capitalize on the opportunity that now presents itself, because this is the world in which we now live in. The only certainty is that there is going to be uncertainty.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for that actually very detailed and thorough response. In keeping with my theme on the importance of people, Honourable Member, and I've also heard the opening comments of the Leader of the Opposition, but Honourable Member, the importance of CARICOM, I think that we have to spend some time talking about how important CARICOM is. And, you know, I recall studying the Treaty of Chaguaramas as a student, but we didn't come into contact with CARICOM and CARICOM issues on the street previously. I recall when the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas was signed, I think around 2001, the contact that I came into relationship with that was actually from the former Prime Minister asking you, yourself then, to come and have a conversation with some young, up-and-coming upstarts like myself around the importance of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. I think it is a total error for any person, particularly anyone in this room, to associate a people's excitement about an issue with the importance of that issue. And therefore, I would wish you to tell us in your words why you think CARICOM remains important and what possible benefits would redound to Barbados and the region from the recent CARICOM meeting that apparently did not stir enough excitement in the mind of some.
Honourable Member, I think the magic of CARICOM is multiple. On one hand, and the tendency is to look at it purely from an economic perspective, but there is an integration aspect of this. The movement of the Caribbean people together, the cross-fertilization of our ideas, quite frankly, of our cultures, our languages. And I believe that the beauty of that is going to be manifested in Carifesta in a couple of months. I sincerely feel that, again, one of the good things that we have been able to do is to broaden the base of what is now called CARICOM. And for those who are critical of it, perhaps they should ask themselves, why is it that we began as an association of, 14, 15 states? Today we are at 21. And we have just brought in, just finalized from our end, Martinique's inclusion in CARICOM, and all that awaits is now for the French government to do those things that the French government must do. And Guadeloupe is also knocking on our door. French Guyana is also knocking on our door. So it suggests to me that while there are critics in the crowd, and there will always be, I suppose, there are obviously a number of countries out there who see some benefit to being part of this association. Now, what does the association do? You have a common external tariff so that the goods that are produced inside of that common external tariff, the countries of CARICOM, are able to trade with each other against a protective tariff wall that allows for external goods that would otherwise come in and swamp us and destroy our small or fledgling or developing businesses, that they now must be rendered less competitive against our own goods. And that is an important thing because it allows for a tariff to do what a tariff really is intended to do, ensure that there is the opportunity for developing business to develop. There's also the fact that CARICOM has done is part of a best practice or recognized global best practice, where disadvantaged countries and disadvantaged regions and disadvantaged sectors within countries are able to get a special and different type of treatment because of the fact that they are facing circumstances which are difficult, which are perhaps injurious economically, and basically, as the Prime Minister says, sometimes you need a little fiscal space, a little elbow room. And that is one of the good things about this region and the arrangements that we have within the region. Honourable Member, if I had to go further, I would say to you that perhaps some of the advantages in CARICOM is in what it is seen to be but has not yet become. And you know, there was an ambition at one point to have a parliament in the same way that the Europeans have their parliament. And that the function of that parliament was to be able to bring to bear at high level some scrutiny and some interrogation of the challenges that are facing us collectively as small states, and to try to carve out collective solutions. Now, we failed to do that so that the voice of our members of parliament are not necessarily heard in CARICOM in the way in which it was envisaged, but it is something that we can still achieve. And quite frankly, it is something that, in my judgment, we should strive to achieve. Equally, if I was sitting where the leader of the opposition now sits, I would go back to the days when it was contemplated that there be a meeting at regular intervals between the region's leaders of opposition, so that there can be some continuity to CARICOM and some common understanding of what it is about. Because what we heard today is perhaps the best evidence that is available of the dearth of understanding about what CARICOM is really intended to be. I don't wish to use the word ignorance, Honourable Member. I wish to say a dearth of understanding. Do not put words or seek to put anything else in my mouth. And I feel that that dearth of understanding can be bridged if it is that we have, at an institutional level, that type of interface between leaders of the opposition. And frankly, it takes us to a better level of governance because of the fact that you have an interface then between what those in opposition would seek to have implemented, and quite frankly, where there may be a limitation of perspective, as happens from time to time in government, you are given a fresher and a different perspective and a different lens through which to see the development of the region. And last but by no means least, there's an aspect of this that speaks to the development of our young people. And then this is going to be found in the revised treaty. But I think that this is really the spirit of the region. The functional cooperation that we have, where we share best practices. Which is the country that has the best cancer treatment policy? How can that be shared and mirrored and replicated across the region? What country is doing best in education at primary and secondary level, and how can that be replicated? Those functional cooperation things are absolutely critical. As we go forward, obviously, we are going to have integration and deeper integration, free movement, and that is going to come certainly by way of people having access to education, having access to healthcare, especially primary and secondary education. And it becomes a question of capacity as you go forward. But what is the message that this all sends to our young people? How do we involve our young people in this so that they can lift their gaze towards the future and say that this region offers some hope by way of an institution that is relevant? And again, I believe that part of what was intended and what we have not done but must now do is to make sure that we have as part not only of the heads meetings, but part of the regular meetings at different levels of organs of CARICOM, whether it's COTED or COSOD or whatever, that you get some of the country's sixth formers and fifth formers to participate in the same way that we have gotten the business people to come and sit down at the table, the private sector people come and sit down in a COTED meeting, because they must see the region's governance system unfold. And it is relevant in the same way that it is relevant when we see a school send a delegation here to sit upstairs there and in the visitors gallery and watch the Barbados Parliament at work. That is how we reinvest in the future. That we are not doing it, for me, is a sad thing. Is it something that we can correct? Yes, I believe it is. But when you go back and read Havelock Brewster and all of those who were in the early, Norman Gervin, all those people who were in the early stages looking at this, this was the type of institution that they contemplated then. And there's still room for us to achieve it now.
And Chair, my third question, my supplementary question, keeping on the theme of people. And I'm doing this, Minister, deliberately because I feel that people have to understand that there is a direct relationship between what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is involved in and the lives of ordinary Barbadians. And in that vein, Chair and Minister, I would have brought to this Parliament legislation pertaining to children. We are finalizing legislation pertaining to the elderly. This Parliament approved legislation pertaining to persons with disabilities. We are also working on legislation and policies related to the advancement of the rights of women and other gender issues. And I think it's important, Minister, particularly considering that when we brought those bills, in many cases, though the primary work of the ministry is always going to be for the people on the ground, the average Barbadian, their lives, the things that we concern ourselves about, there is an international component. We commit to a lot of international treaties. And I'm just asking you, Honourable Minister, what are you doing? What is the team doing? What is the ministry doing in relation to protecting the rights of these ordinary persons, these vulnerable persons, children, the elderly, women, and so on the international stage? What are you doing to defend, what is the ministry doing to defend the most vulnerable persons who are Barbadian, but indeed in the world? Because I do believe that this ministry, now more so than ever, has a world voice. And we cannot take for granted that in the last few years, the country has a larger voice. And so how are we using that voice to be able to advocate and to protect the rights of the most vulnerable?
Honourable Member, this is a very good question, and the truth of the matter is there are many dimensions to our response. We have recently gone to secure Professor Udine Barato's leadership, the Committee for Elimination of Violence Against Women, Discrimination Against Women. And this is done because, as you say, we are trying to lend global voice to imperatives, and we see that as an imperative in Barbados. Equally, on the question of what I had called before some of the global imperatives, this country would have hosted a public hearing on the advisory and securing an advisory opinion on the climate emergency. Perhaps the title is a little bit more technical than that, but it is the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, which met here in Barbados at that hearing. I'm happy that the Leader of the Opposition accepted my invitation to attend, and perhaps in more gracious spirit then than he was this evening, but he did attend, and the judgment on that matter is pending and should be available very shortly. And in similar vein, we participated, I myself went to the Hague to do the hearing on climate justice as a human rights crisis. And that decision is due in in the summer of this year. But honorable member, I think that, as I said, there are many dimensions to the way in which we are treating to these issues. Perhaps the most important is the effort to build out in this country, and I've recently taken the paper to Cabinet and secured Cabinet's blessing to go forward, a Paris Principles compliant national human rights institution and an accompanying mechanism for ensuring the implementation of human rights in Barbados. Now, again, I think we have been very flippant in this country about human rights and the way in which you treat to human rights. And it is important that leadership is given to this matter. I believe, honorable member, that all of us grew up in Barbados, and we have heard people speak, and perhaps we may all be guilty of it to some extent, speak very loosely and indifferently about persons who are disabled, differently abled, speak very loosely about same-sex gender relationships. And there are those who today will defy you as to whether that is a matter of human rights. But the fact of the matter is that globally, this is how it is seen. And we have to take strong positions. I have said in this place before, and I will say now, it is not, none of us have an entitlement to cherry pick which human right we are going to support and which human right we are not going to support. And one form of discrimination is as vulgar and distasteful as any other form of discrimination against another human being. And we are all shaped in a crucible where we came through a racist and classist society to have emerged to the point where Barbados is now. Not that all the racism dead, or that all the class distinctions and so on are dead, but the fact is we have gone through that crucible as a country. So it is very important in my judgment that we have a national human rights institution that can give thought leadership and direction on some of these issues, and to ensure that we educate, first of all, Barbadians about the importance of us being able to live better together as a people, and to share that type of approach to life with the rest of this region, and by extension, the rest of this world. Exceptionally important now that we are living in a time where there are those in other parts of the world who treat very indifferently to matters of diversity, matters of equity, and matters of inclusion. And we have to make sure then that there is a voice that stabilizes. And you asked before what it is that small states can do. That is one of the things that small states can do. We may not have the diplomacy of military might, but we have the diplomacy of influence. Now, the Paris Principles compliant national human rights entity is something that I will ask one of my senior Foreign Service officers to elaborate on. But let me say to you that by Paris Principles compliant, I want to say this for the record of the House. We're talking about an entity that must be established either under the Constitution of Barbados or under primary law such as an Act of Parliament. It has to be independent in nature. as is the judiciary. So it must have formal and functional independence. And equally, it has to be autonomous in terms of its funding, so that the funding for the institution must be guaranteed and that it cannot be at the whim or fancy of anybody, Prime Minister or otherwise, to pull that. And obviously, if this Prime Minister currently has presided over the passage through Cabinet, then it has the imprimatur and blessing of this Prime Minister. But I do not know that if there was a change of government, who would succeed her. And we have seen rampant chaos being displayed by others, of whom only one is represented in this Parliament. And in such an environment, grotesque as it is important to make sure that the institution be protected from that type of unseemly practice and behavior. Equally, there must be an annual reporting to Parliament, and there must be freedom to address any human rights issue. That is what we're talking about when we talk about the Paris Principles. They conceptualize that type of approach, where an institution is free to function, it is financially backed, it is independent in nature, and it can say, I want to address the issue of discrimination against homosexuals in Barbados. And perhaps now is the time for us to start to have these candid discussions with our people. And this is where the thought leadership must come about, because for a long time we have been content to sweep types of discrimination under the rug. An honourable member, I congratulate you again, because you were the minister who piloted the bill here, or the bills rather, that have so successfully placed into a new tier of our democracy the rights of the disabled in this country during the course of the last couple of months. So that basically, Minister, is where we're at. And I would invite Mr. Tyrone Brathwaite, if he can elaborate further on where we want to go with the National Human Rights Institution.
Thank you, Minister. My name is Tyrone Brathwaite. I'm Senior Foreign Service Officer, currently overseeing the Human Rights and Multilateral Relations Desk at the Foreign Ministry. Minister, I don't know that there's much that can be added to what you have put forward to the Honourable House this evening concerning the NHRI, but just the National Human Rights Institution, that is. But just to indicate that the establishment of the Institute forms part and parcel of Barbados fulfilling its commitments or undertakings made under the broader framework of the Universal Periodic Review under the UN Human Rights Council, that each member state of the United Nations system undergoes on a cyclical basis every 4 years. And the first period, we're into our fourth cycle now, the first having been in sometime back in 2008, I believe. And over the course of the 4 cycles of the review, Barbados has consistently acceded or assented to the recommendations coming from its peers at the international level that the establishment of a National Human Rights Institution form part and parcel of global best practices in the area of the promotion and protection of human rights globally. So the move that has been made is within that framework and in keeping with commitments already made at the international level and following international best practices. That is about as much as I could add to the Minister's exposition of the matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, SFSO Brathwaite. And Honourable Member, Mr. Chairman, I don't know that there's anything I could usefully add to the question.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Honourable Minister.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that they do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until Friday, the 25th of February at 10. Friday, the 25th of February. Sorry. Friday, the 28th of February at 9:30 a.m. 9:30 a.m.
The question is that this honourable chairman be suspended until Friday, the 20th day of February at 9:30 a.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands suspended until Friday, the 20th day of February, 2025 at 9:30 a.m.